Questions. I thought I really address using this format in a way that it was going to help people become educated about the economic long wave. Obviously, a lot of people, economists, are not going to believe in it or articulate that because it doesn't serve an interest. In that, the economic long wave is just reflective of a social cycle. Governments, central banks can't stop the inevitable. In that, the cycle is that it's born, it rises, it falls, and then it collapses. And then, as Kondratyov learned, and Schumpeter went on to explain, is it evolves, right? There's no linear progress. Interesting, Neil Howe just came out with his latest book. We're living in the fourth turning, and it's in the same format. You have these cycles because it becomes corrupt. There's wealth inequality, and that stems really from two major sources. That is asset inflation through this credit bubble and also the fiat monetary system. So anyways, let's get to the first week. I've been here on YouTube, and I answer separate questions for my subscribers, paid subscribers, to the model. And I'll explain that a little bit later. Somebody wrote in, I'm not going to use names, but I'm just going to cover them because what I like about questions, other people are thinking about the same thing. So this individual loves the format. He bought his first house, or she, it doesn't say he or she, so in the 70s. Yes, he's really that old. Since my first house, and I purchased and sold a dozen houses as a family, and now as family shrunk. I've been through many housing and stock market crashes. They've been rescued by lower and lower rates. That's true, even though inflation kept on dropping. You can thank China and its ultra low manufacturing costs over the last 40 years, offshoring and globalization. That's part of the cycle, which is true. Now, deglobalization, he mentioned onshore, nearshoring, and friendshoring. That is true because the cycle is switching. We are decentralizing. The common theme is that things are going to cost more and more every year from now on. The biggest war in Europe since World War II is escalating, which we agree is part of the economic winter and civil unrest. That's part of the cycle. Let's see here. The West, we have enjoyed the greatest wealth generation of all time since the beginning of civilization, which we agree. And it was possible by not only superiority, but really it's always it's the innovation, right? That's the most important thing. It's the U.S., but capitalism, it's morphed into creditism. But the problem is that the problem with creditism or a fiat monetary system, that's over-indebted and it's not producing the wealth. We've gotten away with what makes countries wealthy. So, yes, I agree with that. And I think in some ways I disagree, which is that is fine. It's never a problem to agree or disagree, but I like the points. But the thing that I want you to understand is that when the system changed from capitalism and we went on this fiat monetary system and governments became fiscal spendthrifts, we don't need a gold standard if we just had a balanced budget amendment. In that, governments would have to live within their means, and they haven't, so we're now at a point that now the governments are in trouble. And that's where we find ourselves today, along with the private sector. In the 30s, after the private sector collapse, the governments were able to step in. They were fiscally responsible. They were paying down debt from World War I. The problem is now both sides of society are over-indebted. This person writes that these presentations are great, and he likes or she likes the explanations and visuals, perfect for absorbing crucial information. That's why I've done this. I've wanted to go on a route to articulate the message, simplified, because the long wave, I've been a student for 35 years, right? Some of you may not know, for about 23 years, I was a private wealth manager, financial advisor, whatever you want to call it now. And in those times, I went through a real estate bear market and 2 stock market crashes, and was able to save clients through the 2008, and saw the slowdown was coming in 2020. So, but I realized that, writing a book will still be too overwhelming. I read an enormous amount of books, and I still revert back to the book. So in this format, I can red pill you slowly, so to speak, right? That's the whole format. Individuals ask me if I've come across Jason Pizzino. He pushes the 18-point-year real estate cycle when the bubble bursts and all the economic value reverts back to the land. I'm actually very well versed in all cycles. I've studied every cycle, even the climate cycles. It's fascinating. Yes, I'm well aware of it. There was no 18-year cycle in Canada. We just kept inflating the asset. If you follow the time clock, according to his value in Canada, we're at the 16th hour. I've seen some other people articulate that the cycle is going to peak in 2026, maybe later in the US. I see the real estate cycle turning up, but here in Canada, the latest numbers just came up, and year over year, we're still falling. Month to month, it's up slightly, but the financial cycle is leading lower. So I'm very well aware of it. Actually, it's part of the Kuznets cycle, right? There's 3 that I focus on: the long wave, the Kuznets or real estate cycle, because the real estate cycle is really important to the economy because it's a leveraged asset. And real estate, and the problem I have with real estate prices is that since 1984 in Canada, real incomes, after inflation, have been stagnant. So Canadians have gone into debt to make up the difference. Loves the short video. Nothing beats the long form lectures. Well, that's really nice what you have to say. I'm trying to work on even my presentation, get rid of these ums and ahs and articulate the message right. This is what's really important, to articulate information factually, historically accurate in the age of misinformation and biased views, right? Because we have the long wave going in this direction, and the UN agenda wants it to fall in that direction by force and misinformation. That's why I've said it's going to fail. So that's an important thing to understand, that what's coming. But I will do both. Timely information. Had the pleasure, you heard me at the Bitcoin conference. That was interesting because the charts were out of line, and that's luckily I knew my stuff because I was able to think about exactly what was the message, right? Bitcoin is part of the decentralized renaissance. This is the monetary exchange because of technology. Someone who's conned into pre-cons, I'm at the loss as what to do since these condos won't be valued at their purchase price. I can't begin to explain how stressful this is since I'm stuck closing or defaulting on them. Yeah. Are you aware that I went through this myself? But pre-construction I bought in 1989, February. I was engaged to my wife at the time on February 14th, and that Sunday we bought a condo, and that was the exact top in Toronto real estate. So I know what you're going through. Because of those devastating losses, this is, I think, is why I'm here today, understanding how things work, not trying to understand economics, trying to understand how the economy works. And I was so frustrated working in the business that where I was doing well for my clients, but I was being told, well, you're a market timer, but the clients were making money. So through that loss, I wanted to create one of the top forecasting models in the world. That's it. That's been my goal for myself. And to capture this real estate cycle is bittersweet. So I know what you're going through. Now, I can't give specific advice. I'm no longer a financial advisor. I do have a model that a paid subscription, and I can give you consistent general information that I give to every person. So it's the same across the board. The reason why I always recommend you work with a financial advisor, he or she will know your personal details, your cash flow, where you are in the life cycle. And usually I would recommend a fee for only, so they're not biased, because if you like the model and the model's heavily in cash right now, it's not going to affect their income. You don't want somebody just selling you a product. You want them to do what's in your best interest. And right now we're late in the business cycle. We've turned over in the real estate cycle, and the long wave is turning down, and that's not really good. What I can tell you, if you were my niece or nephews, my nephews have not bought a place because they know what their uncle went through. And I went through it personally, so I know the devastation when you see a falling market for 4 years. We tried to hang on for a couple of years, and then we were forced to sell it because it kept going lower. And the stress, and the ongoing stress, because it caused stress in the family, the relationship, and so forth. So here we are. You want to take your losses as quickly as possible, because the stress of even lower prices will weigh on you, will impact your family, your relationships, where you live. I mean, again, I know what you're going through, because I had to move back with my parents, and we switched with my ex's parents, and that was tough, and our savings were wiped out. I was furious. And I'm furious now because how big it is. So that would be my advice, is the sooner the better you cut your losses, the less stress you have to deal with a little bit later, okay? How does immigration affect the timing many immigrants are willing to live with multiple adults in their home to pay down the mortgage? Yeah, I get that and so forth, but the reality is that 30% have already defaulted. Immigration will only cause inflation, because we have shortages. This immigration policy, I mean, I've heard downtown Toronto's horrendous to be. We have to stop immigration until we fix our own economy. People are hurting. We have a massive asset bubble. It's going to impact the banking system, which will impact the government's finances, which will have a currency. We just have a systemic change in crises after crises because of this fiat monetary system that caused society to live not to live within their means, so to speak. What's the max drawdown on real estate you see in GTA? This downturn, 50, 25%? Do you have a number? Well, here's what I'll tell you, and I know it's hard for people to believe, but a 50% drop in Toronto will bring us to the peak in '89, where we fell 25%. Now, we've had numerous indices drop 50% last year. Renewable energy to ARC over 80%. Why do people think that it's not possible in real estate, especially because it's leveraged? Oh, it's going to impact the economy. We agree. This is what the bears have warned about, the dangers of a leveraged asset. There's been research. Don't let an asset bubble, especially when tied to real estate, the dangers. And here we are. It's in the UK, it's in Canada, it's the United States, Australia, and New Zealand. History is very clear. And how do you explain that? Here we're advancing. We have now artificial intelligence is coming into our lives. And yet we don't learn from history. Never let an asset bubble get out of hand, especially if it's credit to real estate. Never have a fiat monetary system, because it will end up as we are now. It will become worthless. Never deregulate the financial industry. It will dominate the economy as we have now. We have too much finance. Hence, you understand why we have these cycles. And we have this belief, well, not myself, but the majority of Canadians, Americans, Europeans, that governments and central banks can prevent bad things from happening, which is ludicrous. Because, you know, math still matters and economic growth still matters, and it has to come from productivity. If you're not creating productivity, you're not creating wealth, and you can't tax the individual. Well, you're not creating an income, and then you're not creating the taxes to pay for the social programs. It's that simple, and for some reason, that message is diluted today, where politicians are wanting to make these promises and they can't deliver on them because we don't have the productivity or the economic growth to get there. They've only indebted society, they've only taxed them to a point, and this currency depreciation, or you call it as inflation, is hurting the average Canadian and soon to be the middle class. The Edmonton market has been sideways since 2008. Yeah, it's pretty much the case out west, because after the commodity cycle did collapse. The impact on Edmonton and Calgary and anywhere else where we didn't see a crazy run up like Ontario and BC, it's the banking system and how it impacts the economy. So it still will impact everything, so to speak. People are happy that I'm here on YouTube. Yeah, I've been told, but it's just the timing wasn't right, and I knew this was a better format. Is it reasonable to say prices should go back to the 2000 levels? Well, you can say this, that the monetary wave began in 1984. We had a run up until 89. We corrected almost all of it. During the 90s, real estate prices went sideways. So 2000, yeah, 1996 to 2000 would be a minimum target eventually. We'll see how long it takes. And that just will bring prices in line with incomes and inflation, historically where asset prices usually are. They love the graphs, and it cuts through the tunnel vision and the noise of year over year and the peak and so forth. Yeah, you know, here's the problem. Sometimes I forget that most people don't follow the long wave or in the market, so they want something simple. I'm not trying to talk over you. I'm trying to make it simple and educate. So, yeah, it is very simple, and that's really the goal. I mean, I want to set up a studio. I'm actually at a studio here at home, so I could do this anytime I have some ideas. Quebec seems isolated or insulated from the peak. Would a graph of real estate history long wave of that province plus Montreal be possible? There's a lot of voting influence. He agrees that history repeats, doesn't rhyme. I don't have anything in particular. The only thing I can tell you or articulate is that because the epicenter of these credit bubbles are in GTA and BC, that, again, like the other questions, will impact the banking sector. And when it impacts the banking sector, it affects all of real estate. And usually if real estate is falling, it falls across pretty much right across the country, but not as much, of course, because there isn't as much leverage, you know, if that makes sense. So across Canada, 50%, because Ontario and BC are overweighted in the index, especially Ontario. But realistically, we're looking at impacted in other places. Sorry, I just wanted to shut off my phone. Not as greatly, shouldn't fall as much. How does the debasement, currency debasement, play into things? Cannot see Trudeau government cutting spending, but I can see them printing billions. If we do excess printing, wouldn't real estate values stay flat nominally, even though they're losing value? I.e. cash isn't necessarily a better store of value than property. That's a great question, because in a credit-based economy, That's hard to do, and I'll tell you why. Since the economy is so leveraged, the price of credit, and this has been a thesis within the long wave, the monetary wave, where the price of credit drove real estate, they try to print, the bond market will panic. The bond market will panic, interest rates will shoot up to 10, 15, 20%. What will that do to real estate? It'll collapse the economy. So they might attempt to print, but the printing will probably come after deflation. So deflation first and any chance of hyperinflation. And it's really the public that will determine that. A person does like that this is done in small format. Yeah, again, it's really to educate and make it simple and answering the questions. Some people are thinking about this. And the great thing about a video, you can stop, start it, rewind it, go to a different point, fast forward. So that's what I do. And you can get the information that you need. So whether it's short is enough. I know if I go to a lecture or a seminar and it's too long, you just get overwhelmed. Even though it could be great information, there's only so much you can take. So keeping it short gives you enough information. Can you categorize 3 groups of people, assuming these individuals are in the the mid-30s with a household incomes of 100 to 250,000 per year salaries? What they should be doing between 2024 and 2032? All assumptions, of course. The reason I ask is to get a better understanding of how we should prepare during after the deleveraging cycle. Wow, that's a great question. Now, the problem is you can't get specific. I could be general overall. Now, if you want to know what to do regarding the allocation set, I do have and developed a long wave model. It's perfected over the 23 years I worked in the investment business and the 10 years I was out of the business. In that description will lay out exactly what to do. Right, specifically, because what I'm doing here is just general information, but it'll give you, during economic winter, more than deleveraging, the cycles will go sideways to down, if anything. It won't be going up. So you can go to my website at the Economic Long Wave, or you can go right to the Substack account and subscribe to become a paid client. I made it an expense of $20 a month, or you can pay up to $200 a year up front. And it has a model. And you see, if you subscribe to it, you'll have access to the back model. When I launched it in May, it's heavily in cash. Now, I designed it really for myself and the baby boomers, but I don't care if you're even 20. Do you want to lose 50% of your money? I mean, the only one I'm giving away is that it's super bearish on real estate. And there will be no buy signal for years. Could be a decade, possibly. So if that's what you want. So specifically, I can't give scenarios because what is your cash flow? What's your income? What debts do you have? Right? Only a personal financial advisor can help you there. But you can work with this model with a fee-only advisor so they can help you. And who knows, maybe the advisor might subscribe to the model. I do have a couple advisors that subscribe to, so I know what they're going through. So I can work with that. That's probably the best thing. And you can go to a website and get individual consultation where I could sit with you, with your advisor, tax, accountant, whatever, and set a course of plan. But it's going to change, right? I can see, it's a satellite view of the long way, but I can't tell you specifically 2028, 2030, right? The model will change as the information becomes available. I have a particular thing, even though the model is bearish on the U.S. and everything else, but the model is still participating in the U.S. market going up. It's just how it was designed, and it's working out well. So I hope that helps. Okay, I copied this before. Yeah. The problem is that we're super indebted. That's really true. Okay. I think you might be incorrect. For investment with unlimited funds, though I suppose they could short, burst the bubble, blah, blah, blah. BlackRock and Vanguard can pretty much do whatever they want. I mean, I think it's ridiculous that mortals have no say anymore. That's not really true. Foreign capital does always go into countries in an asset bubble. So when the commodities, if you think about it, even the 70s, right? When commodities are booming, a lot of capital came into Canada and the dollar became stronger. So Canada benefits, or the currency benefits, but really we're still seen as a resource economy, so we do well when commodity prices rise. In terms of BlackRock or anything else, this cycle, the pendulum is swinging toward the individual, and it'll be the elites and those in power who are trying to retain their power will pay the price. No, there will be a revolution against the status quo. That's what collapses, and the status quo will be in fear because they have the assets. I told my clients, or advised my clients when I left the business, that was more than 10 years ago. Don't be going around and displaying your wealth when things get really bad. People are going to be angry that you're doing well. So, if anything, those people will be, I mean, if you think about it, you have some funds, hedge funds, start buying up all the properties in Canada, and people aren't going to give up their homes. No, we need to restructure the debt. That's the solution, which I'll talk about in the future. This Klaus Schwab thing, they're just going to do a lot of economic damage. This UN that they're going to control society, it's just laughable. You think, society is going to realize that the governments and central banks is not as powerful as they think that they are, or they believe themselves that they are. And the social cycles, the Kondrativ, the Seculum cycle, the civilization cycle, that's what drives society. And when I say the Kondrativ cycle, it's not me, it's Kondrativ himself. It's just his observation of these social cycles that repeat. And as they repeat, they have certain outcomes, so it's easy to forecast where we're going. We got caught up in this Keynesian philosophy where governments can step in. Sure, that works. But the governments only has their own self-interest, and those in party want to be reelected. They didn't do what was best for Canadians. They should never have this run perpetual deficits. And here we are, forgot the lessons, and they're going to pay a price. And we know that governments will be forced to become much smaller. 25%. I mean, we did that in the 90s when that bubble burst in 89, and this one is much larger. Not hard to forecast what's going to happen. So, those companies will go under, but it's not this beautiful deleveraging. It's not this beautiful economic winter, right? It is harsh. You and I, all we can do is prepare and try and navigate, right? That's the long wave. It helps you navigate. At least I can help the businesses, but no, the power will shift to the public in this cycle, and it's decentralized. And what's emerging on the other side is this powerful decentralized renaissance, empowerment of the individual technologies. We're not going to need big governments anymore, right? But that shift does not come until you get to collapse. This is where a lot of technological forecasters make a mistake. You need the collapse of the old paradigm, and when you get that collapse, it allows the evolution of the next decentralized renaissance, the fifth Kondrativ wave. And this one's going to be a doozy because, what started the process was the internet, and the internet information revolution, or ICT revolution. To this day, 1 million people are joining that revolution every day. I mean, you and I have been spoiled. I was an early adopter in the internet, and I'm going into my third decade. I mean, that's how I discovered the long waves on the internet in the 90s. And look at it today, what I can do and communicate with people around the world. Yet 1 million people are still joining this revolution. You know, what's the impact, right? But we're going through a phase where the old paradigm has to die. So with the old and the new, you're naturally going to get a clash because the old will not give up their power willingly. Anyways, I think I've answered all the... Oh, one more. Joe, I was thinking some of us were wondering between you and other educators whether or not people who are older or over-levered, on the primary residence with plenty of wiggle room in terms of monthly income, mortgage ratios should be worried. I personally don't view my situation as tenuous, but perhaps I should. Yeah, I probably because I went through it. And the cultural psychological shift from 88 to 94 was so opposite, where couldn't go wrong. What's the problem with leverage? Let's buy 2 or 3 more properties. Oh, I'm worth $2 million. I could be worth $4 million in 5 years. And those same people were bankrupt by 94. And I remember the couple were my clients. They were prospects at the beginning. You know, Olympia, New York collapse. One thing you have to keep in mind and how to best answer this is the banking systems will be impacted and the ability to acquire debt. Can you secure, who has any certainty about job security when you have a credit contraction, as we saw in Japan in the 90s and globally in the 1930s? So the best thing you can do, as I've said, is deleverage yourself before the economy forces you to. And that's very disruptive. But you're making that choice. In 1992, I was forced to make that choice. So where are you in a better situation? Now, most people, don't believe that's going to happen. But we're here, 1 year now into downturn real estate prices? And they have a long way to go. And that's going to cause, right? The demographic crisis is going to cause a real estate crisis, which is going to cause a banking crisis. They're going to try to bail out and save, which is going to cause a sovereign debt crisis. And the sovereign debt crisis, we're talking interest rates north of 10%. In Greece in 2012, they went to 65% because they were concerned that Greece was going to default. Now, a lot of people say, oh, that can't help. We have the resources, yada, yada, yada. It's always happened throughout history. When you start spending money that you don't have, and you're a bondholder, you don't think the government's going to pay you back, you panic, you sell. There's no bids and interest rates skyrocket. That's just the reality. And then that will lead to a currency crisis, right? Because we've been devaluing the currency for almost 100 years now. So best to be in a situation of strength. And I want to be wrong here, right? But when you're a student of history, you just read these books and what's happened, you say, well, we're just going through it all, right? If you want to know how to design a collapse, this is what you need to do, right? These 10 ingredients. We have all 10. And I just can't fathom why humanity just keeps making these same mistakes. This is just complete greed. When I say greed, it's not necessarily the speculators, but governments. The greed where they think they can take care of everybody. They are doing 3 things they know they shouldn't do. They're devaluing their currency, they're getting into debt they can't pay back, and they're taxing people at their limits with now inflation. If incomes are not staying up with inflation, every single day you're bringing another person into poverty. You get poverty, you get a lot of angry people, and we're starting to see that. We have incompetent leaders today, right? This is part of this wave, right? You always get incompetent leaders who have no background in leadership or finance, believe that they can direct the economy, which assuredly will be insolvent within 10 years. And then we go through the crisis, right? By the 2030s, we'll be redesigning Canada. Hopefully she stays together. That's what I hope, because we have the resources, we have the people, we have the technology. We just don't have the politicians in power. The political thinking is to keep putting the brake on the Canadian economy, which is, but, you know, people don't understand this. Anyways, I'm rambling. I think I've answered, hopefully that answered your question, but just, you have to plan for the worst and be prepared. And one last thing, there was a philosophy from Japan, and the corporations had this, they bastardized the English word, and cash flow, they would always talk about cash flow management. And that was really cash flow management, right? Just to watch your cash flow. In a deflationary collapse, debt deflation, some people did very well. And I'll mention this and then I'll stop it. The Kennedys, the dynasty was not how much he made before, but during the 30s, Joseph Kennedy was shrewd and saw what was coming, and he tripled his net worth. So during economic winter, there's an enormous amount of opportunities, and that is being prepared for it. So it's not to say that you cannot have a great outcome during economic winter, but you need the strategies. And the strategies will be aware of what's coming, how to deal with it, and how to allocate your finances, right? So as I said, one more plug for, subscribe to the Substack account and try the model. You can try for a short period of time. You can subscribe to it monthly. And if you don't like it, you can cancel it at any time, and let the model guide you through. I designed it for this because I knew it was coming. This is why I launched it here, right? It was just to help people get through this process and help Canada build the decentralized renaissance, which I envision a much more localized Canada, a lot less power being in Ottawa, more power toward the provinces and dictating, because community always knows what's best. Now, I will say one last thing. Even though economic winter, we don't call it depression, because economic winter alludes to economic spring. So we will have economic spring. The amount of patents of the technology that's coming is unbelievable. So the wealth will be there. But the old system has to collapse first. And it's getting through this. That's going to be the key. Most people will survive, will get through it, and they'll do very well. And then we can start the next cycle, right? Because energy moves through media and through a cycle. So there always will be a boom and bust. Nothing lasts forever. No civilizations last forever. Kondratev recognized capitalism as evolutionary to the upside, as long as we allow creative destruction. That is, the monetary system doesn't work, our healthcare system won't work much longer, education system is failing us, it's just too expensive. The political system has to be revolutionized. I mean, probably we're heading toward direct democracy. I agree with Martin there. So there's so much, and that's creative destruction. That's good news. One last thing, and I keep mentioning more, but again, you can fast forward. I know this is longer than normal because I'm answering questions, but renewable energy is a growth industry, but to tax and stop the old paradigm before, you're causing mass starvation. This is dangerous. This stopping fossil fuels before the renewable energy is there. If you want to have these technologies, solar, wind, small scale, nuclear, all these things, fantastic, great idea. But if you don't, the costs don't come from itself. Like this technology here is adopted widespread across the world because it became cheaper and better than what they had before. The same thing, if renewable energy, if it just the costs are low enough without taxing and making the old paradigm more expensive. If it doesn't happen that way, it's going to cause mass poverty, and it will fail, and people will push back against it. That's the problem I have with it. So I'm bullish on renewable energy, but not it's not going to happen as quickly as people think. Okay, this was a first attempt of 40 minutes, not bad. But again, I don't mind because it's answering the questions that I got to help you understand this cycle and how to get through economic winter, right? So keep watching, because we're on the cusp of economic winter. I believe it should start to show some evidence by the fall. I'm looking for certain indicators, but definitely by 2024. And the key is that you want to be acting before the economy forces you to change, right? Because when the panic comes, that will be the last of the bulls comes, then it'll be harder to do things. So, I mean, you know, if I had access to this information early 90s or 89, would I have not bought the condo? I don't really know. I was young and ignorant. As things were getting bad, would I have acted with this information sooner than later? Again, I'm trying to be honest here. I don't know. Because, you know, you put your life savings into something you just can't fathom to lose it all. But there was just a despair, and then we realized it was going to get worse and worse and worse, and we had to leave. And I couldn't declare bankruptcy because I was in the investment business, so I had to pay it all back. So I know what people are going through. I can say I'm an expert in real estate collapse because I bought at the top. But again, that's what drives me, right? That's why I want to build. After I had some not too happy occurrences in the investment business, I was ticked off because I called things right and then they didn't act. So that's why I want to go this route. I can allocate, connect with the audience quickly. Boom, we're in and out when the model changes. I don't have to spend 6 months seeing everybody to change everything. 24 hours, you'll receive this message, you'll act on it, and that's what makes me happy, right? I love studying this stuff. I find the long way fascinating. You know, you want it to be in a business where you can fairly exchange some value, but there was limitations what I had before, and I don't have that today, and that's why I'm doing this. So anyways, thanks for listening. I hope I answered all the questions, and we'll keep running this. I know as it becomes larger, you know, I've only really started doing this for the past week, but I'll still try to answer questions, right? Maybe 1 or 2 each one, because most of the time I want to keep it short. But again, the beauty of all this, you can stop, start it, fast forward it, and this is the beautiful thing about technology. Thanks for listening. Thanks for the questions. Leave your comments. I read them. I'm curious what you think, your experiences, insights. Maybe I'm not aware of something. If there's something I pick up, I'm going to acknowledge you. Listen, because I give a tip of the hat to all the people I've learned from. Okay, so thanks for all the great questions, and keep watching. Talk to you soon.